I'll start briefly with who I am. So actually, as Emmanuel said, I'm the head of revenue management and pricing in Movida. It's the second largest car rental company in Brazil. Actually, the third now, because there was a merger recently.
It's a very small one, like only 45,000 cars.
Yes.
Something like, so not a big thing.
Exactly. And before that, I used to be the head of revenue management and pricing in Azul Airlines. I don't know if any of you guys know it, but they have been flying to Europe recently. Some of my background, my bachelor was in economics, and I studied a lot of statistics and econometrics after in Masters of Science of Economics, just so that you know what is my bias when I'm dealing with some subjects. And Portuguese is my mother language. My English is not great, so you can imagine how is my German, which is the worst one. It's in the sequence. So, okay, let's go. Actually, I divided the presentation in two parts. The first part is more of a comparison between the two sectors, and that could have some impact on the pricing strategies, on the pricing environment. And then we'll go down to pricing and how do we do the inventory controls itself. So it's a deeper dive. So here, one of the main differences of the sectors is airlines are exposed to 40% fuel costs, and FX plays a huge role, especially for the companies which are not in the US. So it's like 80% of costs exposure to fuel and foreign exchange. And while the car rental companies domestically, they are not exposed to that. So that allows less fierce competition in the pricing strategies. The difference, one more relevant difference between car rental and airlines is while airlines depend solely on passenger transportation, the car rentals usually offer fleet outsourcing and management, and they have another division for used car sales. And the second and the third are usually a big part of the revenue. So sometimes the companies focus more on those divisions and less on the car rental fight. And then again, that lessens the pressure for fighting penny by penny. Of course, this is my vision, okay, of the Brazilian market. I know the market sometimes is very hard in other countries, but that's my vision. We can discuss that later if anybody disagrees, and feel free to interrupt me at will. One of the differences I figured was the level of differentiation. Car rental, sometimes you can have different, you have a lot more difference in the products you offer. So you have different kinds of rental. You have the daily rental, you have the monthly rental. You have, some companies have up to 40 types of car groups the customer can choose upon. And there are also differences between manufacturers. In Brazil, some companies have exclusive access to buying some models. So BMW is for my competitor. I work with Audi and Mercedes. And so that allows some level of differentiation also. And airlines differentiate mostly in scheduling and service levels, so everybody's playing the same game. So whenever you have no differentiation, the only thing that's left to fight for is price. One thing that I love in car rental industry is that you can adjust supply and demand more easily. It's not like you can transfer 2,000 cars tomorrow for a location that you need more supply. But that's a lot easier to do. So you get some trucks, you send your cars away, and in a week or so, you redesign your whole network of cars and to match your demand the best way. In airlines, that's too complicated. That takes time. You have some regulations problems. You have to meet some operation criteria, so minimum operation levels. That's hard to do, and it takes a lot of time. Each new flight, each new route needs to be approved by government, by the airport, so it's not that easy. And also, I guess car rental is less affected by exogenous factors like meteorology, regulation, crew union, I don't know how is that in France, but in airlines there are a lot of union regulations that make it very hard for airlines. If the guy is about to exceed their monthly hours, the captain can fly, and then the flight is canceled, and then everything gets screwed up. That, of course, you have regulations also for car rental, but it's less critical than it is for airlines. So that was the first part of the presentation. I just wanted to do some parallels between the airline and the car rental. And now we go to the most interesting part of it, the reason why we are all here. So speaking of inventory complexity between airlines and car rental, whenever you are buying a ticket to fly, you are buying a seat type, a daytime, and a length of stay, if you're not buying a one-way ticket. While when you are renting a car, you are choosing a car type, and the other ones are basically the same, the daytime of pickup and the length of rental. While in the airlines, I have just to check the availability for the seats in the specific flights that a guy is looking for. In the car rental, I gotta check the availability along the period that's been searched. That was new for me, and that adds a little bit of complexity to my inventory. And so in airlines, you do the nested inventory pricing. So that means I can imagine I have 100 seats. I allocate 10 seats in a fare, the next 10 seats in another fare, and so on. So there's a way of saving work for later. And because of this characteristic of inventory, I can do the same for car rental. So the prices are defined like instantaneously. There's no dynamic price is not the right word, but there's no price changes based on the inventory levels. The complexity of the demand. In airlines, my no-shows, when I got to car rental, I was really scared. The first question I asked was like, what is the no-show rate? And the guy said me 35%, and I said, that's crazy. I was used to 3% to 4%, so the overbooking levels are much more aggressive in the car rental than they are in the airline industry. And I really think the reason for that is that there's no commitment from the customer when he rents a car, because he does not pay. There's no upfront payment, and that causes the higher no-show. And another difference that's very significant is that the passengers, they used to plan their travels, so they buy with a lot more in advance than they do the car rental. Sometimes they decide that their car in the airport, they go to the branches and choose whatever is cheaper. So that doesn't help us in the sense of forecasting, because whenever you have your demand concentrated in the 2 last days, that makes your life very, very difficult to predict your inventory and your levels of supply that you're gonna need. How is pricing done in airlines? I'm not doing advertising, it's just a reference. Competition website scraping, I guess mostly everybody does that. The most common for airlines are those two, Infer and Kill2. I worked with both already. And as I said, once you have the pricing level set, you go for the allocation in inventory, and the allocations in inventory are usually nested, more or less like that. So you separate a number of seats for each fare class that you define, and the sales, they flow smoothly. So whenever you don't have those seats anymore that were allocated for a fare, they just jump up for the next one. Okay, so continuing. How do I do my pricing in car rental? Right now, we still do the same website scraping, but I'm doing with Python and Microsoft Visual Basic. I know of a good solution for that. You can talk about it later. But and then my system, I don't know how is your system. I have a known system that was developed by my IT team. And I don't know how does that work for you guys, but I don't have I don't have the fares between groups independent. So whenever I set a price for a group, the other groups are priced automatically. So I can't allow to have a huge database with 1 million different fares. So here's somewhat of the rationale we use to define our rate sets. So basically, we get the fares from the competition. So we start from the lowest group, which is the entry group, which is 65% of our demand. And we define the fares by the frequency at which they appear. What does that mean? That the fares will be defined as more or less like this. So suppose this is a specific market, and the fares that my competitor has are those 6 fares that appear here. But I just can create 2 in my system. Let's say I'm not able to create 6 different rate sets with all those combinations. So basically what I do, I have a script, and the complexity is a parameter of this script, which will say, okay, so 99 was the most frequent fare I got for this group, so it's going to be 99. And the same for the next groups. And what we define, if my rate sets would be 2 or 3, is this parameter of complexity that I set in my algorithm. If I define my strategy to be below my competitors, then that 99 wouldn't be 99, it would be 97, depending on the strategy I set before. And how is that strategy set up? We usually set it up using historical data and the load factor forecasts. So, for example, if my load factor forecast is above 80%, I would set my strategy as a fare premium to my competition. So I would get their value and add something up to have a higher fare than they do. What is really important here is to have the definition of a max price. Otherwise, you end up with some weird examples. I think everybody who works with pricing have already seen of books in Amazon costing like 1,006,000. Because if there is no maximum price, you always get your competition price plus something. If their strategy is the same, you end up increasing the price endlessly. So basically how my strategy works is, if my desirable fare is above the max price that I set, the max price will be the price that will prevail. If not, if it's below the max price, then the desirable fare would be the one chosen. And the same thing for the low load factor forecast. If my forecast is below 80, let's say, I will set an undercut strategy, and also with a minimum price. If it's above the minimum price, the desirable fare will be the one chosen. If it's below the minimum price, it will choose the minimum price. So there is something very important here. That's the definition of the 80, the minimum price, and the maximum price. How do we define that? Anybody works with something similar or not really? Yeah, so what we do to define which load factor makes sense for me to chase, and what's the point upon which I should not be chasing my competition anymore, is my historical data. So for each market, for each date, and for each seasonality, those parameters of load factor are going to be given to me by my data.
André, how do you do if you...
What were my lessons learned in the air industry? I got a lot of knowledge in the RM and pricing systems or providers. I think the speed in the fare change and the response of competition is a lot quicker. And also there seems to be more maturity in the industry in the sense that the competition understands better each other's movements. So whenever somebody comes up with a weird price, the second one that saw this price will price 1 cent below. And so everybody will know who started the mess. So they're gonna know who they will be fighting against. And I don't see that level of market understanding in the car rental. It's more messy. And in the airlines, I use it to have a bigger awareness to sales promotion. Anytime the competition would come up with something, you would see me doing exactly the same, R$1 less. Real is my currency. So you would see me responding to the sales promotion immediately, and I don't see that concern in the car rental to do that as much. Whenever I see some competition doing a sales promotion, we decide, okay, we're gonna do ours next week, and it's gonna be better than theirs. So it's not like it's not always. We don't do the mark to market every day. And there used to be more rigor with the sellouts and spoilage. So whenever I would have a flight that would be sold out 3 days in advance, the guy, my boss, would shout on me and say, "Come on, I would have three days still to sell that flight, but you screwed it up." And for high seasons, for example, in the car rental, it's okay if you have all your cars already sold out 1 week in advance.
Even 1 month.
1 month?
Sometimes.
What would I say would be the next steps for the car rental? Implementation of prepaid solutions. We did that in our website recently. The results were amazing. And we are doing some testing with the discounts levels to see what's the percentage that would adhere to this system or not. So right now we started with 5% discount, and 10% of our site was going to the prepaid. When we changed the discount to 10%, we got 20% of the traffic going to prepaid. So this is my rule of thumb. I don't know if you guys have any other different experience on that. The development of loyalty programs, I think they're more and well developed in the airlines than they are for car rental. And there are, as everybody knows, a higher number of providers of RM and pricing solutions that already have the whole industry knowledge in them. So I missed that in the car rental, and it's good that we have WeYield for that. So all the industry knowledge is already built in the system. And we started doing some fleet optimization via operations research. That's also a good thing that we are starting in the very beginning, but it helps a lot. I don't know if any of you guys do that, but basically, yes, basically we start, before we do the pricing optimization, we do a fleet optimization to see what would be the optimal fleet by branch and by location. And in this model, we add a transportation cost as a penalty for the need to bring cars from here to there. So basically, it tries to maximize the revenue by car, and given the costs, what would be the ideal fleet movements that should be done overnight, if that's feasible or not. It helped a lot. We are doing only right now in the big cities where we have more than 7 or 8 branches, and it brought a lot of good stuff already. And we do this fleet optimization, and then after the fleet optimization, we do the pricing optimization, so that we know exactly what are we gonna sell before we put the prices on it. And of course, the price optimization via statistical models and algorithms. I think when I got into Movida, we lacked a lot of it, and now we have many of our answers are given by numbers and not by guesses. And I think that was also a good thing, and I think we should try to put that as the next step for the industry.